But first, the coalition has decided it wants to win the next election. After 6 months of vacillating over whether or not they should simply ape the government's energy policies, the coalition has come up with an alternative. Instead of destroying the Australian economy in pursuit of net zero, they're going to prioritise providing Australians with affordable power.
There is now a very, very clear contrast when it comes to this debate. You have a coalition which is all about energy affordability while doing the responsible thing, paying our fair share, versus a government which cannot meet its commitments when it comes to energy prices. As a matter of fact, they've gone up by nearly 40%, and there is no sign that that is going to change. So there is now a clear contrast, and I look forward to getting out on the road and selling our coalition policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we finally have a contest. And if you doubt me, well, just listen to the sound of the climate industrial complex spontaneously combusting. We'll start with the Climate Council, an organisation that believes Australian weather can be trained like a dog if we're just stern enough with our carbon dioxide. Here's CEO Amanda Mackenzie.
You got to be joking. The Liberal National Coalition is ditching net zero. They've gone from "I don't hold a hose, mate" to "we're throwing fuel on the fire."
What? Carry on.
It's a reckless plan to torch both our climate and our economy. If this was enacted by a government, it would mean more fires, more floods, more deadly heat waves. It's saying to hell with our kids' future.
The coalition's plan means more floods and more fires. Please, bushfires aren't caused by Australians burning coal, and floods aren't prevented by Australians putting up a wind turbine in a sheep paddock. Anything Australia does will make virtually no difference to global temperatures, much less the number of floods and fires. We could cease and desist all emissions tomorrow. And to be honest, the planet, well, it would hardly blink. When your opponents resort to shameless fear-mongering, well, you know you're on a winner. And then there was this.
And here's the kicker. Renewable energy is already the cheapest form of power.
Now, if I were the coalition, I would be rejoicing at this response because it's pretty easy to counter. Do you believe the Climate Council or do you believe your power bill? The coalition can absolutely win this argument if they commit to it fully, and Labor knows it. Have a listen to the PM on Thursday. Mr 34% sounded nervous, which is why he went straight to name-calling.
The idea that the lesson that the Liberals have learnt from their defeat is that they need to be more right-wing, more sceptical, more in denial about climate change and continue to engage in these climate wars.
Wanting to prioritise affordable power makes you right-wing. Really? That's his line of attack? I say bring it on. By this definition, your grandmother turning off the aircon to save money is basically a militia member. Again, if I were the coalition hearing that, I would be incredibly encouraged. As for the PM accusing the coalition of becoming more sceptical, well, I think we're all pretty sceptical of anything this Prime Minister says, especially when it comes to power prices. And you heard him say that the coalition is in denial about climate change. Well, they're not. They've said they accept the science of climate change. They just don't accept the part where Australians have to go bankrupt to appease Greta Thunberg and Al Gore. But the PM's reflex reaction is to label the coalition deniers. Well, if that's how Anthony Albanese is going to argue, with slurs and invective, while the coalition hammers away at the need for cheaper power, I'm putting my money on the coalition to win that particular argument.
Good policy is moving towards the cheapest form of new energy. It's not going backwards. I think Australians want Australia to move forward. My government trusts the science. We're focused on the needs and aspirations of the Australian people. We're focused on making sure that we can deliver reliable energy. We're focused on cost of living pressures that are on Australians as well.
Albanese says we're moving toward the cheapest form of new energy, which begs the question, when will that be reflected in our power bills? To which he can't say. And did you note there that he said he's focused on cost of living pressures? Well, rising energy costs are the biggest cost of living pressure facing Australians right now, and they're rising faster than the PM's frequent flyer points. To ease cost of living pressures, the government has been subsidising power bills. So their action on cost of living is an admission that their promise of cheaper energy is a lie. I'm telling you, the Liberals can win this argument and win government if they fully commit to it. Hilariously, Housing Minister Claire O'Neill admits we're paying higher power bills, but she says higher power bills are not the result of the Albanese government's policy. Oh no, higher power bills, hilariously, are entirely the fault of opposition infighting. Have a listen to this.
The Nationals, the Liberals, they're all saying they're going to stab each other in the back and come off the front bench and get off the front bench. It is all just complete diversion. Australians have watched the coalition for a decade go through chaos and infighting over the issue of climate change and energy, and the only result for you at home is you're paying higher power bills.
What? The coalition infighting? That's the reason that my electricity bill hasn't dropped $275 as promised? If so, I assume it's the same coalition infighting that caused my local medical centre to giggle when I offered them my Medicare card as payment after seeing my GP last week. Honestly, can someone please remind Claire O'Neill that the coalition, well, they're not in government and they haven't been for more than 3 years. Susan Lee and David Littleproud could hold daily cage fights in the Liberal Party room and it wouldn't affect power prices a bit. Claire O'Neill should have stopped talking, but she kept going.
The Liberals' decision to walk away from net zero is not just about politics. Net zero means lower household energy costs because our country's making the big investment in renewables we know we need to make.
Net zero means lower household energy costs. Really? How's that working out for you? Energy costs have gone up 40% since Labor came to power. I remember when they promised just the opposite.
Reducing power prices by $275.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
We'll get power prices down by $275 a year.
$275 for the average house, lower in 2025 than today.
You have to laugh. Labor politicians telling us that net zero means cheaper power bills reminds me of this British MP back in 1998.
I will not accept that it's a highly dangerous road. Work is finished. The Central Reserve safety fencing will go ahead.
Luckily, no one was hurt in the crash.
But back to Claire O'Neill, who didn't take long to pivot to emotional blackmail, as those without a winning argument always do. Tucked up in her car, she insisted that dealing with Australia's 1% of global carbon emissions was key to saving the world.
And it's about making sure that we leave a livable planet for the next generation. What could matter more than that?
What could be more important than destroying our livelihoods for virtually nothing? Let me think. What about ensuring the next generation can afford to turn the lights on? Like I said, Australia could cease and desist all carbon emissions tomorrow, and it would make hardly any difference to global emissions. They continue to go up. Nor would it make a jot of difference to global temperatures. So no one's buying this "we have to lower emissions to save the world" nonsense anymore, not even Bill Gates.
So when a major party steps away from the target like this, it raises really big questions. Who is going to make sure that Australia is competitive in what is obviously a global clean energy race? Who is going to make sure that communities don't get left behind? And most important of all, what message are we sending to the young people of this country who are the ones that will ultimately live with the consequences?
This is what Labor have come up with in response to the coalition's energy policy, and it's just rubbish. Who is going to make Australia competitive? Well, right now, the government's net zero obsession is making us utterly uncompetitive. As for the global clean energy race, how's that going? America has quietly wandered off the track. China's driving a diesel tractor right down the middle of the track. And Australia? Well, we're sprinting enthusiastically toward a cliff. As Donald Trump so brilliantly described at the weekend to GB News, we've been tricked into running a race where if we win, well, we actually lose.
The whole thing is a hoax. And your country, among others, but your country is one of the worst
You talk about UK. It's one of the worst in the world. They believe this nonsense, this fiction. As an example, China, very smart. They sell the windmills, almost all of them. Used to be Germany and China, now it's mostly China. And yet, if you go around China, you see almost no wind farms. So they make the windmills and they sell it to the suckers, you know, the stupid people. Yeah. But they don't have them themselves. They use oil and gas, they use coal, but they don't use the wind.
Teal MP Allegra Spender tweeted this at the weekend, and I quote, "The Libs are playing culture wars with energy policy and the country is worse for it." So advocating for lower power prices is engaging in pointless culture wars? By that logic, turning on your kettle is basically hate speech. I always thought the Teals were out of touch with ordinary Australians, but claiming the pursuit of cheaper electricity is a culture war issue, well, that simply beggars belief. And then there was Labor MP Julian Hill. He went with this, quote, "It's official, the extremists have now taken over the Liberals." Well, if I were the Liberals, I would be loving that response. The Labor Party is now saying that if you believe we should have affordable power, you're an extremist. That's their response. That's the argument they're going to make. Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young took it up a notch, as the Greens want to do.
They look like a bunch of nutters.
Or strong words from a woman who once waved a dead salmon around in the Senate chamber like it was the hammer of Thor.
For a rotten, stinking extinction salmon. Extinction salmon.
Again, if I'm Susan Lee and David Littleproud tonight, I am hugely encouraged. When Sarah Hanson-Young calls you a nutter, you know you're on the right track. But first prize for invective goes to Treasurer Jim Chalmers.
Susan Lee has caved to the smirking crackpots and cookers in her own party. Now, this is not some temporary phase that they're going through. This is not some temporary lurch to the right. Over recent years, this coalition has become a party of extremists, and Australians would pay a very hefty price for that extremism.
While progressives call the coalition nutters and cookers and crackpots and extremists, the coalition can simply, well, point at energy bills. Chris Bowen told journalists at the weekend that he didn't want this debate. I bet he didn't.
We didn't seek this debate. I would prefer a degree of bipartisanship about these matters, but we won't be walking away from it. We will make this argument every single day, if the coalition wants this, between now and the next election.
And then he got on a plane to fly to Brazil, belching emissions all the way. This is the strongest policy position the coalition has taken in years. Cheaper energy, real-world economics, and a government whose only response is insults, hysteria, and renewable fairy tales. If the coalition sticks with this, if they actually commit, I reckon they can win the argument, and they just might win the next election.